Okay, today's lecture is biochemistry of alcohol, and my advice to you guys is to try to pay attention to the last few lectures because I know you don't have time to read new lectures. You're already saturated, you're loaded with the material, so we're going to try and simplify it as much as possible. We have 3 lectures left for Mo. One now, one tomorrow, the other one for next week. So let me try and simplify it for you as much as possible. And I know most of you are going to be interested in hearing what I'm going to be saying today about alcohol. We will be talking about tricks, how people try to fool the system in terms of how you can avoid getting drunk, how what they say in the movies, when someone is drunk, has hangover, is it for real that once you put him under cold water it's going to work, or give him coffee it's going to work, and people taking antihistamine, does it help, and all these things, and how people actually try to figure out how many drinks they need so that they don't get drunk, and so on. So we will talk about all these aspects. For today's session, we will be covering 2 objectives. The first one, identify the metabolic products of ethanol metabolism. And then we're going to look into metabolic effects and clinical significance of ethanol and its metabolites. Just to let you know, same lecture I was teaching to the 3rd year, so I'll be meeting you hopefully in the 3rd year, but we're going to be talking more about muscles towards the end. Acute and chronic alcoholic myopathy, I'm not going to cover it in today's session. So we hopefully, if I meet you in the 3rd year, if we live, inshallah, then we will be talking about myopathies and how it can result from alcohol intake. So what is alcohol? We already know alcohol could be ethanol, could be ethyl alcohol, and actually alcohol is a source of energy, and that is 7 calories per gram. Do you think it has any value, nutritional value?
No.
No vitamins, nothing. It's just a source of energy. And this is why, if you look at the cold weather countries, such as Russia, they always drink vodka. Why? Because they're trying to keep themselves warm. And because of the fact that we do produce a lot of energy, and we compare alcohol 7 calories per gram compared to carbohydrate and protein, which are 4, but less than the 9 by the fat, right? So basically it results from the fermentation in yeast. And one thing about yeast, that believe it or not, they die in concentrations of alcohol greater than 10 to 15%. So even though they're making the alcohol, if it's high, they die. This is why, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, if people make beer, it could go bad, because what happens, the yeast dies and then it makes it taste bad. That's why you have to know when to stop it and so on. It's funny enough, when I was at the National Guard, I had 3 students chasing me. They want to know how to make it. And they were persistent. I didn't give it to them, but that was interesting. Anyway, you look into the absorption of alcohol. Where does alcohol start? In terms of absorption, it starts in the mouth, esophagus, and it moves into the stomach, and that is 20%. Gets absorbed in the stomach, and 80% in the intestine, upper intestine. What does it mean? Let me just summarize it for you so that you understand the concept of when do you get hangover and when do you get drunk. If alcohol gets metabolized, we don't have a problem. Why? Because we get rid of it. But if it doesn't get metabolized, it gets absorbed into circulation. So alcohol in circulation, blood, affects the nervous system, you get drunk. Is that clear? So when it gets metabolized, so the bottom line, how do I slow down the metabolism. Are you with us or?
Oh, no. I just need to get something. Sorry.
Okay. So the bottom line, how can you slow down metabolism of, can we pay attention please? How can we speed up, how could we speed up metabolism? That's the trick of getting rid of alcohol, and this is the trick of intolerance. So if I ask you, can you develop intolerance? We're going to answer this at the end. So how can we develop intolerance? The bottom line, all what we're trying to do is to slow down the emptying of alcohol into the intestine where the absorption is fast. Most of the absorption of alcohol occurs in the intestine, upper intestine. So by eating, this is why if you look at people who are drinking, they always have something to eat next to them. Nuts, crackers, whatever. They're trying to have their stomach full to slow down the emptying of alcohol from the stomach to the intestine. This way, it allows the metabolism of alcohol. Otherwise, it gets absorbed into circulation, the blood, and they get drunk. This is why they always try to eat when they are drinking. So the bottom line is to speed up the metabolism, slow down the absorption into circulation. Now, it's not only about drinking alcohol. You can inhale it as well. And they do have these equipment called OWL, or alcohol without liquid. And basically all what they do, they have the alcohol, the bottom with oxygen, through nebulization, they can inhale it. What's good about this, according to them, is that it completely avoids feeling hangover. So what is hangover?
It's the aftermath of being drunk.
It's feeling bad after you get drunk, basically. I once experienced this feeling. I don't drink. I have zero tolerance. But I attended Journal Club at the center, and they have their open bar and drinks and so on. And I asked for virgin strawberry daiquiri. Virgin, when you say virgin, that's non-alcoholic. And they brought me an alcoholic one. I don't remember anything that night. At the same time, I asked my colleagues, was I bad? Was I really bad? He said, yes, you were bad. I said, was I dancing on the tables? They said, no, you didn't go that bad. But it made me the next day sick, and I couldn't go to work actually, and I threw up, and it was really a big mess. The whole idea of hangover basically comes from acetaldehyde. And this is how I'm going to explain the whole thing in terms of acetaldehyde. The whole thing, how can you avoid hangover? And that is by lowering acetaldehyde. We're going to talk about Asians. Why? After they drink 1 or 2 drinks, boom, they're really miserable. And this is why we don't see that much alcoholics in Asia compared to Europe. We're going to talk about this as well. So, if you look into this instrument is illegal in Europe and US as well, because it really can get people drunk very quickly. I mean, we're talking about just getting the ethanol into their circulation pretty quick, so this is illegal, but it's still being used. Actually, as a matter of fact, when I moved to Buffalo, New York, I had a new housemate, and I had my shisha with me, so I was happy with it. And then the guy, oh, I got mine. He won, and he broke one. Anyway, if you look into metabolism of alcohol, there are basically, after alcohol is being absorbed, it gets distributed in the body, and around 90% is broken down by the liver. So the liver is what basically breaks down the alcohol. It's not the intestine, it's not the stomach. All what we're trying to do, even if you're trying to slow down the emptying, you're not doing that much. because most of it, in terms of the liver, it has to be metabolized. I'm sorry, the ethanol has to be metabolized by the liver. 10% is eliminated in the urine, sweat, expired air. And this is why we have the breathalyzer. My question to you, do you think, if you were to go to US, hopefully, do you think breathalyzer stand in a court of law?
Yes.
No, the blood test. They need to do a blood test.
They do not stand even if you were driving under influence. So what would stand is a blood sample. Why I'm saying it, because you're going to be asked these questions even if you're taking the SMLE, and this is actually SMLE Part 3. What would stand is a blood sample. Do you think anyone could force that patient, that drunk person, to give a blood sample?
No.
Because everyone has the right not to incriminate himself, so if he says, I don't want to give a blood sample, he has the right to do so. But the bottom line is drunk. You think he knows what's the difference and so on? I mean, if he's drunk and they ask him for a blood sample, he has no clue. But the bottom line, everyone has the right to protect himself from incriminating himself by giving that blood sample. That includes even for paternity, or if you want a DNA sample from you. As a subject, you can always say, I don't want to give a blood sample. And the law protects you there, just to let you know. I don't want to give a blood sample to compare it with, what do you call it, a sample that was, a DNA that was found in a homicide or whatever site. You have the right to protect yourself by not incriminating yourself. Anyway, so if you look into alcohol, it presents empty calories. And when I say it presents empty calories, we're going to talk about this in more detail. But if you look into one pen, which is 473 ml of 80 proof, that is 40%. Give me an example of 80 proof, 40% alcohol, let's see who knows. Vodka, there you go, there's one.
Bourbon.
Okay, tequila, whiskey.
Jack Daniels. Champagne.
Okay, these are all around 40%. Guys. Well, one of the things that always people do there is they take, especially in the US, they take tequila shots. And just to let you know, tequila is basically, it's made originally in Mexico. And actually it's only poor people who drink tequila and it tastes like a pea. Not that I tasted it, but I was told it tastes like a pea. But the thing is, people they think it's a cool thing, so they're taking shots of tequila. And believe me, these are bad, high alcohol, but it doesn't taste good. I don't know why people even take it.
You said that yeast dies if alcohol concentration
Yep.
is 15. How do they make it?
Distillation. That's the answer. Okay? And I'm not going to tell you how you distill it. Anyway, if you look into the 473 ml is equivalent to 444 ml grams times 0.4, 40% times 7 calories. That is 1260. This is your daily requirement, basically, of calories that you need if you just drink 473 ml. Is that too much? I mean, a can of soda, small can, that's around 375 ml. So that tells you it's not that much. Yes.
This is why they link the obese people with the alcohol.
We'll talk about it. These are what we call beer bellies. So how does alcohol get metabolized? We have the first pass metabolism, second pass metabolism. First pass metabolism is in stomach. Second pass metabolism, which occurs, and this is the major site of breakdown, occurs in the liver. We said 90% in the liver, 10% right there. And it involves two enzymes I'd like you to know that are ADH, ALDH. ADH, alcohol dehydrogenase, ALDH, acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. In the back there, last time. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you to walk out. Both of you. So we have ADH and ALDH. alcohol dehydrogenase, acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. And what did I say about feeling hangover? And that is acetaldehyde. So let's talk about that reaction. There are three pathways that are involved in ethanol degradation. The first pathway is alcohol dehydrogenase, ADH pathway. The second pathway is microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, or MIAS system. If you notice here where I said Km equals 2 millimolar, Km equals 10 millimolar. What is Km? Zymology. Michaels-Menten constant, you didn't have it, right?
No.
Okay. Basically, it is the substrate concentration needed for 50% activity of the enzyme. Substrate concentration, and this time the substrate is ethanol. So you need 2 millimolar ethanol to get 50% activity of the ADH. You need 10, this is 10 millimolar of ethanol to reach 50% activity of the MIAS. So, which tells you that MIAS system needs higher concentration of ethanol. But one thing you need to be aware of is that MIAS is involved in hepatic drug metabolism. And this is where the problem is. Many people who are drug addicts, they think that they can take the same dose every time, there's no problem. The only problem is they mix it with alcohol. Why? Because MIAS is not only involved in ethanol metabolism, but also it's involved in drug metabolism, including therapeutic drugs. And we're going to give some examples. Sulfonylurea is an example, which is for diabetes. But here, we're talking about ecstasy, THC, other drugs. What happens is that if the MIAS is involved in ethanol, it's busy in ethanol, it does not metabolize the drugs. So what happens? You end up with OD, overdose. And that's how people could die. Even though this is the same dose they've been taking, but they mixed it with ethanol. Okay, because the MIAS system now is busy with ethanol, is not busy detoxifying the drugs. But that also applies to many drugs that people take for treatment. It's not only for these drugs, illegal drugs, but also for treatment. So this is why you have to be careful, especially if you go to Western societies and so on, and whatever medication, that medication could get really bad if that person is taking alcohol at high concentration. Not that, occasionally drinking, but chronic drinking, that's where the problem is. Because it activates MIAS at high doses. Why are we saying this? Because unfortunately, sadly, Middle East also is full of people who drink alcohol. And I told you before, there's some statistics, of course people debate these statistics, that the highest consuming country in the Middle East for alcohol is Saudi Arabia. And it's unfortunate, it's sad, but it's a fact as well. So you may be facing that dilemma. You're going to be treating these alcoholic even here. You don't have to wait until you see them in Europe or US. Yes, you have a question?
مثلا an example, if you take 100 milliliters of alcohol, the MIAS acts on that. But instead, if you do 50 milliliters of alcohol and then 50 milligrams of ecstasy, won't it be the same thing?
For what?
For the MIAS activation?
MIAS only at high concentration. It will activate both. MIAS is involved in 15 to 20% of metabolism. Right? But the problem is that when you take too much alcohol, you keep the MIAS, which is 100% for detoxification of the drug, and that's where the problem. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not that much of MIAS, only when you drink too much. Binge drinking and so on. So we have a third system called catalase, also is involved around 3 to 5% of ethanol detoxification. This is the same pathway, basically, that we just described, which involves ADH, and that is conversion of ethanol to acetaldehyde by alcohol dehydrogenase. What I want you to pay attention to is that we're producing NADH, What's NADH for?
Energy.
Energy. Which pathway? Oxidative phosphorylation. How many ATP per NADH?
2 لا 3
علي بخمسة أنا برضه.
1 6
For easy calculations, it's 3, but in reality, it's 2.5, so we consider it usually 3. Okay? So we do have acetaldehyde being produced from ethanol, and then acetaldehyde gets converted to acetate by ALDH, acetaldehyde hydrogenase. Acetate is released into circulation along with acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde, this is what causes the hangover. Whereas acetate gets taken by the muscles and gets converted to acetyl-CoA into TCA cycle. And this is by an enzyme called acetyl-CoA synthetase. It's easy. I'm gonna finish and then I'll take all your questions. Because I'm gonna cover most of the stuff, hopefully in the next few slides. So if you look into it, we have here around 80% of ethanol gets metabolized through this pathway. 15 to 20% through the meiosis, where ethanol is converted to acetaldehyde, but notice here that we are utilizing NADPH. This is a heavy slide, but I'm going to simplify it for you because you already know most of this information. I'm just going to focus on key things. First of all, we've studied glycolysis. Carbohydrate, we have fructose, glucose, galactose. We have glucose 6-phosphate, right? Glycolysis. This pathway, we produce pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid goes into acetyl-CoA, into TCA cycle. Amino acids, we know that we metabolize into intermediates that can get into the whole reaction through pyruvic acid and intermediate into the TCA cycle. Now, if you look into fats, mobilization will lead to release of acetyl-CoA by beta oxidation, which gets into this TCA cycle. Now, here's my question. Do you think fat can be utilized for gluconeogenesis?
No.
Why? Acetyl-CoA pyruvate is not
Irreversible.
reversible. Here it goes into acetyl-CoA, right? But here's the thing. So we have pyruvic acid can be utilized for gluconeogenesis. We already know all this, right? Here's where the issue. Alcohol, when it is involved. Ethanol, acetaldehyde. We produce NADH. NADH is what's for? Energy. Right? Each NADH, 3 ATP. But what happens is the following. NADH reacts with pyruvic acid driving this pathway to form lactic acid. So if you have a drunk guy who came to the ER unconscious, what would you expect his status in terms of acidity, acid-base imbalance? He has lactic acidosis. Why? Because NADH produced from ethanol metabolism drives this reaction this way. But at the same time, it deprives the pyruvic acid from being utilized for gluconeogenesis. As a result, gluconeogenesis is inhibited. What happens? Glucose levels are down. He ends up with hypoglycemia. So if you get someone who is unconscious, you smell the alcohol, most likely is unconscious because of hypoglycemia and acidosis. So you gotta treat both. And most likely just give him some sugar and he should be okay. Now you know why he's hypoglycemic and why he has acidosis at the same time. Yes?
Remember in the previous lectures, you told us when we work out, our muscles get numb because of lactic
Accumulation
acid.
of lactic acid.
So this is why drunk people get feel numb because they stimulated lactic acid production.
Yep. So, if you look into also NADH, when it's utilized into energy production, what happens? And this is my answer to the belly beer bellies. You know what's beer bellies?
No.
Oh, come on, you should know.
They drink so much beer, they have a beer belly.
Yes.
If somebody's drunk and he drinks milk, he won't be drunk, right?
Well, you have lactose, you have glucose, right? Yeah. But do you think someone who's drinking is going to drink milk?
اه
Come on, man.
يكون لين اسباب.
The problem with people who are alcoholic is that they don't take care of their health. And that's the problem. So the question is here, beer bellies. Why do they gain weight? Do you think that alcohol gets converted into fat? Only 3% of it. Only 3% of it. And I just indicated it right there. What happens is we have a metabolism called me first, meaning we already have an EDH for production here. So what happens to this pathway? Do you think that fat is going to be mobilized? No, because we already have the energy. Why should we burn the fat if we already have the energy right there? So there will be some acetyl-CoA coming from here and here, but what happens is the following, is that our beloved officer, and that is, officer, can I keep selling substances for money, officer? Oxaloacetate gets diverted for gluconeogenesis. That's a substrate for gluconeogenesis. TCA cycle is slowed down. As a result, acetyl-CoA accumulates. As a result, we have ketogenesis. As a result, we have ketosis, which makes it worse with the acidosis. Okay? So he could have ketoacidosis and lactic acidosis at the same time. Why? Because there's acetyl-CoA accumulation, because the oxaloacetate is diverted for gluconeogenesis, and as a result, we have accumulation of acetyl-CoA. So everything I said is in this slide, and this slide as well, hypoglycemia and so on. This is just a summary of what happens in terms of alcoholic hypoglycemia. Ethanol, acetaldehyde, acetate. This is by ADH, ALDH. We're producing an ADH. We said an ADH reacts with pyruvate, pushes the reaction towards lactate production. This is why we have acidosis. At the same time, there is reduction in pyruvate because it gets converted into lactate. There is also reduction in oxaloacetate because gluconeogenesis is reduced, and this will lead to low glucose. Similarly, malate. What's the malate? Money officer. So if your oxaloacetate is low, malate is high because it's accumulating, because this is diverted for gluconeogenesis. Anyway, let's move on. Now, the main issue with alcoholism is liver damage. Why? Simple. The MEOS system utilizes an enzyme called CYP2E1, and this is a common question in USMLE. CYP2E1, which is part of the MEOS system. That enzyme, the CYP2E1, is induced by alcohol because it's part of the MEOS. MEOS, we know, when high concentration levels of alcohol, MEOS kicks on, and this will induce the enzyme CYP2E1, which is cytochrome P450E1. As a result, this enzyme induces reactive oxygen species, free radicals, that we will have a full lecture about next week. I will be teaching you oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species. These are damaging to the tissue. They destroy the liver and causes all these side effects that we see in the liver with alcoholism and heavy drinking. So these are the products of oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species. We're going to cover this more, and this is because of the fact that ethanol is metabolized by the CYP2E1, leading to acetaldehyde, and induction of this enzyme leads to oxidative stress. And this is part of the pathophysiology of the liver associated with heavy drinking. Now, ethanol excretion, small amount of ethanol is excreted through sweat. In the unchanged form, that's around 10%. and some are excreted in the lungs, and now we move into blood alcohol concentration, or what we refer to as BAC. And this is a common question also get asked for all residents. You need to know what's the BAC level, which is the legal levels, basically, that they won't punish a driver who's drunk. 0.1%. Most states, they have it at 0.1% in US, Europe 0.1, but some states now they're moving towards 0.08%, trying to reinforce the fact that you cannot drive while you are drunk. Now, one thing also you need to know is that if you take one drink, it will basically increase your blood concentration by 0.02%. However, your body metabolizes 0.02% per hour. So one drink per hour will basically be eliminated. This is how Americans usually they figure out how much to drink, so that they would drink at speed where they don't get basically high levels, higher than 0.1%. So, but you're gonna ask me, what constitutes as a drink? Well, here's an example. I'm not gonna ask you this in the exam, this is just for your information. If we have a normal weight person consumes 2 drinks per hour, what will her BAC level be at the end of that time? Well, let's see first, define what constitutes as a drink. We have beer, 5%, that's 360 ml, so a can, similar to soda size, and that is 1 drink. Or you could go to 240, 270 ml, and that is if you go for malt liquor, which is 7% ethanol. If you go to wine, that's 12%, that is 150. If you go for tequila shot and whiskey, that is 45 ml, which constitute 1 drink. Let's go through the calculations. So we have 2 drinks per hour. So we have 0.02, 1 drink, second drink, 0.02 increase in the back. But also our body metabolizes 0.02. So minus 0.02 gives us 0.02 level if people drink 2 drinks per hour. This is how Americans calculate it. They're gonna stay there for 3 hours, 4 hours. I can get 2 drinks per hour. This way, they're safe. That's how they do it.
So 5 per hour, he can't drive after 5 per hour?
0.08.
So 4.
6, then he's intoxicated. Okay? Because if you look into the second hour, so we have 2 drinks, 0.04 minus our 0.02 per hour, but also we're starting with 0.02 from the first hour, so we end up with 0.04.